I said at the end of my last episode that the worst way or the worst view of God is through a religious lens, and the religious leaders have the most boring view of God. And I say that having come from religion myself. I have always struggled with the idea of following God through the same way everybody else is following God, to worship God, to pray to God in the same way as the other person next to me is doing it. And I get it that some religions say that no, your relationship is unique, but it isn't. If you're just going to church and singing the same songs and praying the same way and praying to this God when somebody else is telling you to pray to this God, then it is not a personal relationship. You're just following rituals. Now, I understand that we humans are very ritualistic beings. We get up on the same side of the bed, we brush our teeth the same way, we get on the road, we go to work, to school, same thing. So it is a ritual that we have on a week to week basis. Now, the problem is that we apply that ritualistic nature to a God. When in reality, if there is what, 8.2, 8.3 billion people on Earth, why don't we all have 8.2, 8.3 billion ways of having a relationship with this God? Why do we want people to belong into one religion and follow God according to what that book from that religion says? We create formulas and we say, this is what God is, and this is what God likes, and this is how God is pleased, and this is how God is displeased. We don't know God. Nobody knows God, especially religious leaders, but here they are telling us this is what pleases God. They don't know. Nobody knows God. Let me ask you this question. Does anybody know you? You, like 100%. Does anybody know what you like? 100%. Your emotions? 100%. Your thoughts? 100%. Does anybody know you? I'm all 99.9999% sure nobody knows you. You barely know yourself, right? Now here we are pretending that we know God. Nobody knows God. Welcome to my podcast, Thinking Unchained, the podcast that unchains your thinking. This is your host, Unchained Thinker, talking to you. You can visit my website, thinkingunchained.com, to comment or discuss today's episodes. Thank you for being here. I'm glad you're here. Now, the question that may be in your mind is, does Unchained Thinker, does he believe in God? And I can tell you I do, but not in the sense of believing in a God. And I will explain maybe a little more as I go with my episode today. I do believe in a God, though. And the only reason why is because I have explored science, I have explored physics. And I almost feel that it is required, the same amount of faith is required to believe in a God as it is to believe in a universe that created itself. An infinite universe, an infinite God, they both require the same amount of faith. It doesn't matter how much proof physics provides to me that there is this beginning of a universe or that there is this big bang, but we don't know what's before the big bang. Then at that moment, we go into the same exact question. What was the beginning of God? What was the beginning of the universe? Scientists, mathematicians, physics, they don't know. They don't know what created this universe. But if you ask a Christian person or a religious person what God is or the beginning of God, they don't know either. So I am in this place where the same amount of faith is required to believe in either of those two. So I choose, it is a choice really, to believe that there is a God. Just because we have this conscience, right? We have this thing inside of us that we always struggle to understanding what it is. And again, hopefully it becomes a little more clear as I go through today's episode. Now, I want you to think of it this way. And this is where I think most people are very afraid to explore outside of religion when it comes to the question of God. If I tell you, why don't you go into physics or chemistry or biology so that you can have a better understanding of God? Most people are afraid of it. They just want to stay with their religious view of God. Why? Because if you go into science, it will challenge you. It will challenge that view. And if I tell you go into philosophy so that you can have a better understanding of God, most people don't want to. Why? Because it will challenge those ideas. And in reality, this podcast probably will have the less amount of listeners. As a matter of fact, even my previous podcast is the one with the least amount of downloads. So maybe people don't care about it. People don't care about who or what God is. They just want to go on live and live their life and not even pause to wonder what God is. But some of us do. I have met many people who have this hunger of understanding what or who or what is it, what is God. But I think that's what happened with the prophets. That's what happened in the Bible. It was men who decided to take themselves away to go and understand God. And they created scriptures. They created books or writings explaining what God was to this person. But it is because they used time to go and understand God. Today, people are too busy. They don't want to pause. They have so many things in their minds: school, work, kids, family, money, finances, politics. It doesn't matter. That people do not pause to think about what God is. So this God is ignored now because we are just living our life. So again, this may not go to anybody. It may just be a conversation between me and myself. I'm still in that search. I'm still trying to understand God. And many people have told me, move on. You will never understand God. And as many as people have told me to stop it, I am still here in front of a microphone asking that question. Science illuminates the mechanisms, and that's what I have realized. The mechanisms, how the laws created by God work, how this God is tied by its own laws. God cannot create this world and this universe without laws. So God had to create mechanisms, put mechanisms in place that even God has to follow. God cannot create Earth or a world without gravity or without electromagnetism or without the weak and the strong forces. So there are laws in the universe that even God itself has to follow. So science illuminates the mechanisms. Now, philosophy challenges us to find meaning in these mechanisms. And that's what I like about philosophy. And as I mentioned in one of my episodes, it's probably the one science, if I can call it a science, that has given me the most peace of mind. It's the one that I really gravitate towards the most. Philosophy is beautiful, but people are afraid of it. It creates headaches. I don't like it. Why? Because it challenges. It challenges us to find the meaning. Why is there evil? And philosophy tries to explain that. Why are there stupid people in the world? Philosophy comes to the rescue. And it is one of the best, in my way of seeing, best views of God. Now, religious teachings, of course, they are still necessary. They inspire hope, especially when explaining suffering and pain, and they give us hope, right? So there is that hope. And I will talk about hope in one of my episodes. I think it is still a delusion, but I will talk about hope in one of my episodes. Psychology, psychology, I will say, helps us navigate this world a little better, understand it from that capacity of psychology, why we do the things we do, why we believe in the things we believe. Sociology does that too. Now, let me present the two views I mentioned in my previous episode about God that I like a lot. One is John Archibald Wheeler. Now, he was a scientist philosopher, and maybe that's why I love his view of God. In reality, he didn't have a view of God, it was more of a view of the universe. He believed that the universe, and if you look at the online, just go to Wheeler's self-observing universe, just Google that or browse it. Wheeler believed that the universe began. It just began, right? And then it started to create galaxies and planets and stars and everything there is to be created. And then it finally creates a U. It goes from the universe being created, goes down into galaxies, planets, and us humans. And then it becomes a U. It turns into a U, kind of a U-turn. And then we are here at the pinnacle of creation, looking back at the universe. And I love it. Love the self-observing universe. Wheeler believed that the universe created us to observe it, to present an opinion about it, so that we can now tell the universe what we think the universe is. That is brilliant. And then I go to Philip Mainlander on the death of God. He believed that God was pure energy at the very beginning, just energy. But in a sense, I would say that was also boring. And that's why I mentioned that religious is a boring approach to praising God. It was boring. His life or its life was not complete. There was something missing and decided to commit suicide. And in that, as God died, it created the universe. It created us because God knew that creating was the better alternative to just staying as pure energy. So creation was the motivating factor for God to kill itself so that then we can be made. And that's almost the observation I have about God. I think we were created to experience life in its entirety, good and bad, suffering, pain, joy, happiness, love, hate, every single emotion, and then present an opinion back to this God. I think God or the universe has created us out of curiosity so that we can experience everything and then present an opinion about this life and about God itself or the universe. And that's what we are doing, is that self-observing universe that Wheeler used to think about. Then we die. And then what? Nothing. We just return to this sea of energy, such as what the Buddhists believe. I believe also that there is this energy out there, the universe, just pure energy. It's just in pieces, such as what Mainlander used to think. Mainlander, remember, he believed God destroyed itself and this energy just became everything we see today. So this energy is all in pieces. And from these pieces of energy, some of that energy is put together by the universe or by chance. I don't know. Those are the mechanisms, right? That we all have those questions. Now, all of these pieces get together and they create you, a bunch of little pieces, and a bunch of little pieces create me. And then when we die, all of these pieces just return to this sea of energy. And then those pieces are just diluted. And then some of those pieces return back in multiple individuals. So I don't come back as me. I come back in many individuals, but pieces of me. And that is a way for me to explain why an Asian person may like salsa music, for example, or a Latino person may like Asian girls, or an American person may like Mexican food. And that's how I explain that. But again, this is all philosophy now, right? No way to prove it. What I'm trying to say is that the universe and God is everything. We are everything, every emotion, everything, every animal, every insect, every atom in this universe is God. God is within us. We are within God. The universe is within us, and we are within the universe. Scientists say that we were made from stardust. So basically, we need the stars to make us. Our atoms were made through in the stars. Again, we are just everything. There is nothing outside of the universe. There is nothing outside of God. That's my belief, and I hope we can all agree on that. This brings me to one very particular verse in the Bible. And I said that Job, the book of the Bible, is probably one of the worst. I don't like it, but I will talk a little bit about it just because there is a part of that little section in that book that it's extremely compelling. And when I say that God is everything, I really mean God is everything. And I will talk about the devil in another episode, maybe in the next one. In Job 1, 6 through 12, I'm using the New International Version. And it says this in verse 6. One day the angels, and I'm saying the New International Version because in some versions of the Bible it says the sons of God. Again, they use now the angels, right? But it was the sons of God. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. So strange, almost ridiculous. But anyways, let's keep going. The Lord said to Satan, so now we're having a conversation between God and the devil here. And again, that's the reason why it's ridiculous. But God is talking to the devil. Where have you come from? Satan answered to the Lord, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. Oh, so now we have the devil just going back and forth in this earth. Verse 8. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? So that means that the devil didn't even have Job in his radar. And all of a sudden, here is this God telling him, hey, you're not doing your job well. Come on. Haven't you seen this guy down there on earth? Then the Lord says to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. What a wonderful guy, right? But then why is God asking the devil, why aren't you doing your job with this guy? Strange. It's a strange passage of the Bible. Number 9. Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied. And then Satan continues. Have you not put an hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then. Everything he has in your power is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger. So now we have this little game between God and Satan, a game about a righteous man. Let's go and see what's up. Let's see what happens if you do this to him. Come on, do your job. Do your best, Satan. Let's see what you can do. And there was this interaction between God and the devil. I don't even think, from reading this passage, as ridiculous as it sounds, that it was God talking to Satan. It was God talking to itself. It was almost like that little devil on the shoulders. This is God with the devil on one shoulder and, his good voice on the other shoulder. So evil and good. But this is God talking to himself or itself, wondering what will happen if I do this to this guy. He seems to be happy. He seems to be righteous and always adoring me. And he seems to be loyal. Let me see. Can we just play with it a little bit? Entertain myself a little bit with this guy? And that's what Job was to God in this case, an entertainment. That's why I don't like the book at all. But it presents that weird story there. And again, I don't understand why Christians do not question this thing. It's a strange thing. And if you ask them about it, they just turn into pretzels talking about how God tried this man because he knew it already beforehand. I don't think God knew. God didn't know what Job was going to do, but God wanted to test it. He wanted to see it. And that's why he did it. But it was God doing it. Now, if you say, well, it was the devil, the devil will not have been able to do anything unless God gave it permission. So who's the one really doing it? The devil is just carrying out orders. The devil cannot do it by him or herself, right? The devil does not have that independence from God. So that means that in the end, it's still God responsible for what happened to Job. It was not the devil. The devil was just the instrument God used. But the devil didn't do it. It was God. God told the devil, have you considered this man? So God evil in display, and religious people do not want to see it that way. Of course, oh, you're reading it wrong and you have to go with the context, and they want to go through other books of the Bible. Ugh, I've heard it all, believe me. One thing that I find interesting too, let's go to John 4, 8 through 9, New International Version. This is an interesting interaction between Philip and Jesus. Philip said in verse 8, Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. Jesus answered, don't you know me, Philip? Even after I have been around you such a long time, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Jesus was actually pretty perplexed by this. The fact that they didn't know him, the fact that they were still asking for proof. And Jesus says, don't you know me? And this is people who walked with Jesus, people who were there with Jesus. And then I go back to the religious people who think they know God. Not even the people who walked with Jesus knew Jesus. And here we are pretending we know him or her. Or, I mean, in this case, it's Jesus. And I will have another episode about Jesus too. Again, may not be interesting, but I'll have another one. I was into numerology at one point, and I remember the Bible talking about numbers a lot. The 40 was always interesting, though. 40 days of rain during the flood. Moses was 40 years outside of Egypt in the desert with his sheep. Then he was 40 years on the way to the promised land. Moses was also 40 days at Mount Sinai. Jesus went to the desert for 40 days before he started his ministry. Elijah, another prophet, was also for 40 days in a mountain. 40 seems to have a strange place in the Bible. But why 40? And I am a person who likes to go camping. I love my solitude, and especially being in the desert. And when you are out there, you start receiving signals. You start receiving messages from, I don't know, God, the universe. Uh, and maybe that's the point. Maybe that's what we are supposed to do. As I explained earlier, we are just too busy to stop and think about the universe and God. But maybe that's what it takes. 40 days in the desert, wondering and asking who God is. Now, back in the day, they used to do it of fasting. They will not have food. And as I am in medicine, I know what happens to a body that has lost electrolytes. It's dehydrated. They start hallucinating. And I've seen that first person. So after a few days, even a person starts to hallucinate. These people, according to the Bible, went 40 days without food. So I can only imagine the visions they were having. They were all hallucinations. Now that I know about science and medicine, the body starts doing very weird things, the brain, whenever you deprive it from food or water. So again, I like to go on camping, and I like to be out there on my own by myself for days sometimes. And I start to get these signals, these thoughts, messages, if you want to call them. But then why? Why out there? Why not here in the city? And this is where I think that we have, if I can say, dark matter. Nobody knows what dark matter is. The scientists have been able to detect dark matter, and it's pretty, the evidence is pretty clear that there is something out there holding galaxies together. And what I think is happening is we are moving through space. So let's go back to what's happening. Earth is going around the sun. The sun, with Earth and the other planets, are moving in the galaxy around a center of this galaxy. Our galaxy is moving also in a direction, and all galaxies are moving in every direction. maybe dark matter is just God's conscience, and we are just traveling through it. And our brains are just instruments. They're just receptors, receive signals and process signals. When we are in a city, dark matter is concentrated. There is a lot of messages coming to us. All of us are creating this concentration of dark matter, of conscience, which I believe that's what maybe we are doing when we wonder about God. When we question who God is God itself questioning who it is or what it is. So maybe as we move through this dark matter, we are receiving signals from it. Maybe the information is out there. When I think about scientists, when have that eureka moment, in many cases, I just think they received a signal that it's already there. The signals are there. We're just traveling through it. But the messages are there. The messages are just around us. Our brains, though, need to be tuned for these messages. And when we go outside of these cities to those places of solitude, that's when we tune our brain to these less signals. There is less noise out there. And maybe that's what they did back then with 40 days. I'm going to go for 40 days into the mountains, into the desert. I'm going to go seek God. It was a good thing, I think, to do it. Einstein kept thinking about general relativity, how light traveled through space. He kept thinking about it. One day he was just sitting at a park, and that's when it came to him. I don't think it came to him. I think it's just when his brain finally was tuned to the message. He finally deciphered the message. His brain finally made a connection to receive it, and then he was able to process it. I think that the more we question, the more we seek an answer, the more our brain tunes for that answer. Again, the answer is already there. It's in dark matter. It's in the conscience. Good or bad, the answer is already there. We just have to tune our brains for that message. But this is the danger, right? What kind of messages am I receiving depending on how I'm tuning my brain? I may be tuning my brain for evil, and then what I'll receive is evil messages. Or I may be tuning my brain for good messages, and then I'm receiving good messages. In the case of Einstein, he was tuning his brain for that question, the question of physics, the question of general relativity. And he received the message. But again, it's not that he received it, it's that the message was always there, but he finally tuned his brain for the message. What we should do in life is tune our brain for it. But again, we don't take the time to do it, right? We just go in life and we don't ever sit down to tune our brains. We just keep going and going and going, and we never tune our brains. But in reality, that's what I think is happening. We're traveling through space. We're traveling through dark matter. And the messages we are receiving as we go through it, it all depends on how we tune our brains. And I say this with the understanding, of course, that it may never be proven, but I see it in people with Alzheimer's disease when I have worked with them. I've noticed that their brains are no longer tuned to receive new messages. They're not longer tuned to process new messages. And if anything, they start usually losing time. For example, what they ate for breakfast, then they lose a few days, what they did yesterday, then what they did last week, then a month ago, then 10 years ago, and they start to regress. So their brain, the tuning of their brain starts to lose that connection to receive new signals. And instead, they start to lose signals, lose information. But I believe that's what our brains are. They're really just antennas, maybe, processing antennas. The antennas receive the message, and that message has to be deciphered by our brains only if they are tuned for the message. Otherwise, it's just a passage. It's just a thought that goes through and it goes away, and we never think about it again. And maybe it's because our brain will never be tuned for that message. But what happens when we receive that one message, right? And we stay with it and we stick to it and we go into a big journey trying to understand the message. That's purpose. A message comes to us. We understand it as purpose, and then we go on in that journey. Maybe that's what happens. But then, how can we tune our brains for those messages? That is the great question, right? The messages are out there, but what am I supposed to receive? It all depends on what questions you have in life. You may have no questions and just want to go to work, get a paycheck, feed your family, and that's it. Or feed yourself. And that's it. That's all you want to worry about. Or you want to tune your brain with questions and you want to go into a journey and you want to understand those messages. Again, the messages are already in this dark matter. We're just traveling through them. You may receive them, you may not, but they are already there. Think about it. What kind of thoughts will you have tomorrow? Do you know what thoughts will cross your mind tomorrow? You don't, because we are just traveling through all of these thoughts. And that's the reason why I think we cannot move time backwards, because we're moving forward. Earth and the solar system and our galaxy, they're all just moving in one direction through dark matter. So we cannot reverse that. We cannot go back in time because it is moving forward through this dark matter. But this is why in some science it's believed that the past, the present, and the future, they are all always there. We have our future still here with us, we have our present, and we have our past. I think that's what it is. Dark matter. It's just there, and we're just traveling through it in the forward direction. But in reality, dark matter behind us is still there with all those thoughts. If somebody goes through the same path as we did, I believe they will have the same thoughts because they will go through the same place in dark matter. But we're just traveling. We're just traveling through our thoughts and we are receiving them and we are processing them. And that may explain why evil. Some people receive messages of evil. Some people receive good messages. Some people suffer. Some people have a beautiful life. And it is just so that we can present a view of it to this universe, to this observing, self-observing universe or this God. That's what we're doing here. Going through dark matter, receiving the messages, processing those messages, experiencing life, creating an opinion, presenting it back to this universe so that this universe can understand itself a little better. When we ask ourselves, who am I think it's the universe asking that question. When we ask, who is God? I think it's the universe asking itself that question. That's all we're doing. And then we die. We go back into this energy, and that energy is diluted into the sea of energy, and then parts of our energy come back in multiple individuals. That's it. That's my belief. Let me leave you with these questions. What beliefs do you hold so tightly that questioning them feels threatening? And I think that's what happens with most of us, right? We feel threatened when we start asking questions that go against our core beliefs. We feel threatened. And I don't understand why yet. I'm very, very comfortable with challenging my own ideas. And again, in maybe 10 years, my ideas will be different. My view of God will be different. And I'm okay with it. I'm not afraid of that. I don't feel threatened. If somebody comes and tells me what God is, I will pay attention to it. I will see if I can grasp something new out of that conversation. But I don't feel threatened. If somebody says God does not exist, I want to know more about it. Why? Even though I have explored that other side of it, I only believe in God just because the same amount of faith is required to believe in one or not believe in one. Let me present a thought experiment to let you go. If you woke up tomorrow and realized everything you thought you knew about God or the universe was false, everything up until this moment, everything you know about God or the universe is false, how will you redefine it? What tools or instruments will you use to redefine it? Will you trust your instincts or your own observations? Will you read a book about it to try to see if there is a new definition of God? How will you redefine this if tomorrow you realize everything you've been told is a lie? Thank you.